Okay, so I think it's about time we get started. Other people will drop in as we go along. Hi everyone, welcome to our Skills for Success event. I'm Amy Davis, the Content Marketing Manager at Reed. And joining me today to give you some advice on how to cost effectively upskill your team is Roger Mason, our Learning Solutions Director. Good afternoon, Roger.
Hi Amy, good to see you.
Thank you for joining us. So everybody, Roger's been involved in workplace learning for over a decade with experience of designing and delivering programs across Europe, Asia and Australia. So just to kind of get warmed up today, you can see in your chat function, if you could just pop a note in there of where you're dialing in from, just so we know how far reaching we are today. That would be great interest and good practice for using the online chat. So for a bit of background to this, we surveyed 2,000 people recently in almost 500 businesses for our recent survey that we did called Skills for Success. And we asked businesses and employed people about their learning and development practices through the pandemic. We found that most businesses have not been providing training at the moment, with many stating that it's not a priority, which is understandable in some ways. But we all on this event know that failing to develop your staff puts you at risk of losing talent, disengaging your employees, and making your workforce feel undervalued. As part of this, after this webinar, we'll provide you with an ebook we created with some tips alongside Roger as part of the campaign. And Roger's going to be talking you through some of the key skills that our research highlighted and some really quick wins to help you fill the skills gaps in your team. The session is going to last about 30 minutes and it's going to be quite interactive. We'll be asking you quite a few questions, but during the session, if you have got any questions at all, please do feel free to put them in the chat as well, and we can discuss them at the end. We'll have probably roughly about 15 minutes, and any questions that we don't get to cover, Roger's promised that he'll reply to them before Christmas and come back to you all. Let's just have a quick look on the chat where people are dialing in from, shall we? So we've got Liverpool, South Devon, sunny Brixton, Dublin, London, Hertfordshire. Pretty good representation from all of the UK there, Rog. So anyway, enough from me. Roger, it's now over to you to get cracking.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, thanks so much. I'd add my welcome. Thanks for joining us this lunchtime. We're going to attempt to do a few things then over the next little while. We're going to do a bit of work around some of the barriers to developing skills and providing training. There are 6 key skills that we're going to look at that came through from our survey. So we're going to spend some time looking at some really practical top tips for you all around that. And then, as Amy's mentioned, we've got a little bit of time for questions at the end. So one of the things that came out of our survey is that 45% of organisations said that they're not currently training or developing their staff, and so almost half of all organisations across our survey. And just again, using the chat, I'd be encouraged to understand from your own perspective whether you're in that 45% who have paused training, or whether you've continued with some sort of training. Maybe that's been reduced, maybe that's increased, but for each of you, what do you consider the barriers to be, or the primary barrier for your organisation? So what we'll then start to do is just compare that to some of the findings from our survey. So almost half of organisations not currently training and developing staff. You might be surprised by that statistic. And I think that seems quite high. You might be surprised that 55% still are. We've got a few findings from the survey as to the reasons behind it that we'll share in a moment. But just be interested to hear from your own perspectives what those barriers might be.
As we're waiting for them to come in, Rog, I mean, from my personal perspective with my team, it's just been the pure time. Everything with the pandemic has left us with no time to train. So we've been doing lots of work, and we've lost members of our team, and there's a lot more work. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers for me. I just see that we've had one comment come through. Ben C said we've continued, although barriers are trying to do it remotely, so working remotely.
Yeah.
And again, another one harder over teams to engage? It is really hard.
Yeah, really difficult. Yeah, I mean, we've experienced that ourselves here at Reed, moving from we've done a lot of face-to-face training in the past, and of course that's had to stop overnight. A couple of the findings that came through from the survey, one of the predominant factors, 55% of those not training were saying it's not a priority. And I sympathise for those companies, because I imagine the priorities being around survival, protecting jobs, protecting livelihoods, protecting lives even, and training has just not been a priority. So I understand that. I guess the challenge is, how long can an organisation stay in survival mode? How long can we operate without adding the skills that are needed in this ever-changing world to our team? So if training's fallen down the priority pecking order for you, you're in the right place. We're going to share a few kind of practical tips with you. A few more comments in here, about the engagement over teams, not knowing what people want to learn or develop in, and what courses you need to provide to achieve this. Thanks for sharing that one. We'll talk a little bit about how we might diagnose some of the skills, some of the training needs. There's been a massive training focus since COVID to support the organisation change. Biggest challenge has been to make it relevant to career development rather than operational product focused. And some of the findings from our the employee side, those on the receiving end of training, we know, and lots of other pieces of research would suggest that investment and training and development is something that employees really look for. It's expected. One of the other barriers was around cost. So just in terms of just having money to invest in training as being a barrier. And so we're going to be talking about a lot of free ideas today. So free tips that you can put into place. So before we get started, I'm going to do a bit of an overview of workplace learning. All right. So I appreciate many of you on the call today might be responsible for training where you haven't had to be responsible for it before. So a couple of guiding principles, if you like. The first one is about distinguishing between knowledge and skills, because the way that we should approach developing these needs to differ. And we'll share with you a copy of a guide that we've written, which goes into a bit more detail. But broadly speaking, if you need someone to know something, that kind of cognitive understanding, the way that you provide that to someone needs to be different to skills, which we need to practice and kind of get comfortable with actually exhibiting. So bear that in mind. Second thing to mention is, before you attempt to train someone, you first need to make sure they're motivated to actually do the learning. You might have experienced this as a resistant learner yourself, where someone's tried to change you or impose a change on you, or you've been sent on training as a prisoner. And as adults, we need to be motivated. We learn best when we're motivated, and that means having an understanding that where we are now in our performance and where we need to be, that there's a gap, and that training can help us close that gap. So a lot of the work that we do in learning and development is around the preparation and the context and supporting line managers and training readiness. So what you can't do is just go and create a course or a piece of learning, send it out to people and hope that it just sticks. There's a preparation work that we need to do first. And finally, a really practical point, read.co.uk have thousands and thousands of courses, and we've partnered with them for this webinar. The attendees of the webinar will be sharing a discount code later. So a lot of the skills that we're talking about today, there are resources online, and read.co.uk courses is one of those places. So I'll introduce you to the discount code for that later on. So with that in place, what we're going to look at are the 6 most important skills as considered by respondents to the survey. So they were asked the question: if you were or are looking to recruit now, what skill would you look for in your workforce? And right at the very top came teamwork. So we're going to start there. You might want a pen to hand, or you might want to have your phone to hand to kind of take photos as we're going through. That's kind of the way I approach webinars, grab photos of the screen. You'll also need your phone to hand for an activity that we're going to do in just a moment, because teamwork, if I was asked to do some work with a team and say, oh, we need better teamwork, we first have to understand what are the constituent parts of teamwork. What do we even mean by teamwork? So what we're going to do is just jump across this screen here. I'd like you to go to menti.com, so either on your phone or on your laptop, however you want to get them. Head over to menti.com, and thanks Liv, showing it in the chat function there as well for a link. That will ask you to put in a code. So if you use the code 7635038, what you can then do is put in your contributions here. So what do you consider to be the characteristics of a great team? I'll just give you a couple of moments to do that. Amy, what about for you as you think about that? What would you consider?
To be honest, what you've got there is obviously trust. Working remotely, it takes a lot of trust. Teams are working differently. You don't know what your team are doing anymore. I've got a team of 4, and I trust them with all my heart, and they've been working really hard. But if you don't have that trust and you're micromanaging, I feel that kind of will jeopardize, I suppose, the workflow and the relationship, and I guess that's a big thing for me. I think communication as well, you've already got that on there, is really big. Understanding, and maybe understanding skill sets a little bit more, because so everybody's got different skills, everybody's stronger, and how to support those skill sets while working remotely, I think is quite a big one for me.
Yeah.
And leadership, I think sometimes you worry as a leader, whether, especially working remotely, whether you're giving them the right direction and leadership and helping people to perform, or whether they're just sitting at home kind of quivering and unsure about what they're supposed to be doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. We've got some more ideas coming in. So this is a word cloud. I should mention as well, menti.com. Here's your first freebie. Is a free tool that you'll be able to find if you Google it, and quite a nice interactive way. The word cloud, the more times a word is mentioned, the bigger the word is. So communication is coming through as a really key theme here by the looks of it. We've also got openness, hard work, collaboration, trust coming through. Yeah, supportive, shared goals and identity, brilliant. We're going to touch on that in a moment. Common goals, respect, some great examples here. The reason I get you to do this is partly as a bit of a demo, if you like. What we've committed to do today is give you tips on how to develop these things in your team. So the first bit is about how do we break it down, and you might use this. You might ask your team on post-it notes. You might ask them in your Google Hangouts to somehow share their ideas. Once people have shared their ideas, you can then look at, well, what are the parts of our team that we need to work on? So, for example, communication is coming through as a key theme here. And then with your team, you can say, well, what is it about that? Where are we at the moment with our communication? So if we were a team and I was leading the team and I wanted to do some work, I'll be looking at this and saying, right, communication, collaboration, trust, there are biggies that people are talking about. Let's rate ourselves out of 10 for each of these. How do we think we're currently performing? If the best team in the world do 10 out of 10 communication, where are we at the moment? That also then gives you a chance to prioritize the work that you want to do. So if communication comes out as a 7 and trust comes out as a 4, like, right, let's start with trust. What can we do to develop trust? A further activity, and we'll leave the screen up for a moment because it's quite interesting seeing the ideas coming through, but if you were to ask your team to tell a story of the time that they worked in the most high-performing team, and I'd encourage you to think about it now. If you were to shut your eyes and think, oh yeah, the time when I was in the most high-performing team that I've experienced personally, what was going on in that team? What were the characteristics of that team? What did it taste like to be in that team? What was the experience of teamwork for you? And as people share that, that's an example that they've been a part of. You can then start to bring in some of those ideas that they've learned from. It's a nice collaborative activity that you can do so people feel that their voice is being heard, which of course is part of a great team as well. So thanks for your ideas on there. We've got loads of good ideas. If we were working together as a team, I think it's fair to say communication would be really key. So in that spirit, I'd encourage you to continue using the chat box as well as we go through. We're going to move back across to this screen. So a couple of other ideas on teamwork, and this actually came through with one of your contributions there. is that for all of the examples of high performing teams that you've been a part of, I'm going to assume that there was some shared goal that you were working towards. High performing teams need a shared goal that they're working towards. So if you're looking to build teamwork, if you want teams to work more effectively, it's not so much a training thing, but a great question to ask yourself is, well, how clear are people on what is expected of them? How clear are we on the shared goal? What about off-site team building events? I know that for many people, when they think about we need to do more teamwork, let's go and swing from trees, and there's a lot of merit in that. You know, could we create a socially distanced, outward bound challenge to build teamwork? We probably could. Before you go off and do that, I'd encourage you to draw from the work of someone called Katzenbach, an expert in this. So he says the primary objective of a team effort must be the members' collective performance results rather than an elusive notion of working together better. I'll read it again. Primary objective of a team effort must be the members' collective performance results rather than an elusive notion of working together better. So if you're trying to build teamwork, concentrate on that performance challenge that you're working towards. And there is no shortage of performance challenges, of organizational challenges that we're facing at the moment. So concentrate people around solving those problems, and that's where the teamwork can start to flourish. So that's our first one. We've covered a little bit around teamwork. We're going to move on to the second one, which is leadership. And if you write nothing else down from this webinar, write this down. Leadership is caught, not taught. Leadership is caught, not taught. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's a bit of a confession for a management trainer like me to make, but it's true. So if your organization is looking for more leadership, and by that we might say more people stepping up, more courage, more selflessness, better decision making, bringing out the best in other people, and I'm sure we all want more of that in our organizations. We need to look at the leadership example that is being modeled at the moment. So start at the top. Are you seeing those things modeled? If leadership is caught, then what the leaders of your organization are modeling, and that might include you on this call, that is the education that your organization is being served up. So let's assume that you've got that in place, right? That your leaders are modeling all of the great characteristics and great qualities you want in a leader. How can you accelerate the leadership development journey for other people in your organization? And I'll share my screen again with a couple of quick pointers on this. So stretch assignments are commonly used, and again, that's something that you can potentially do for free. I appreciate there'll be indirect costs to that, but putting people onto projects which they know there's going to be, there's going to be a stretch for them, is a great way to grow their leadership capability. Linked to that, getting them to journal, so having some way to reflect. It's about having an experience and then drawing the learning points from that. Journaling is a really good way to do that. And giving feedback, so being clear and honest about what's expected of someone, what leadership qualities you're looking for, and how someone is performing against that. Feedback is free. It's so powerful. It's such a useful tool and often underused. So how can you better use feedback alongside journaling and stretch assignments or assignments to projects for people? 37% of our survey respondents are already using mentoring in their organizations. If you're in the 63% who aren't, let me emphasize this as just a great tool. So mentoring, it's free to set up a scheme. It's pretty straightforward. I can share with you some resources to help you set up a mentoring scheme within your organization. And it's been really helpful for me personally, but it's a really powerful tool, really high impact and particularly effective in leadership development. One more on leadership then, the use of internal experts. So a lot of leadership development will involve exposing people to other departments or other functions, and a great way to do that is buddy them up with an expert in that respective department, so marketing or strategy or finance. You might want to bring in experts as a guest speaker. So if you've got a management development program, having internal experts come and present at that with all of their stories and anecdotes is brilliant. I guess a word of guidance on that would be to support them in their delivery, because just because someone's brilliant at finance, for example, doesn't mean they're going to be naturally brilliant at explaining it to others. So, all right, we've looked at teamwork, we've looked at leadership. The third area from our survey, the third most in demand skill is communication, and this came up in our teamwork conversation as well, didn't it, as something that we consider to be important. Now, this one's a really broad topic as well, and if we were to have a conversation, Roger, we want better communication in our organisation. My first question would be, well, let's unpack that. Is that in the way that you handle complaints? Is that in the way that you do internal comms? Is that in the way you do your upline reporting? Is that in the way you do your written email communication? Communication is too broad to be able to just use that loose term and attempt to train people on it. However, there are two key areas in my experience where when teams want to improve communication, it will typically be to do with confidence of delivery, or the clarity of a message. And we'll just look at each of those in turn. So confidence, if part of your training need that you identify is that in presentations, in team meetings, in your Scrum teams, you want people to have more confidence, more ability to assert their point of view, to be able to feel like they can express an opinion, then a great way to develop this is by getting people to practice and film themselves. So film themselves delivering a presentation and then watch it back. Even more powerful is doing that as a team and watching each other's back as well. And I appreciate this is quite sensitive and delicate, but if you set that up in the right way, that can be a really powerful and free learning experience. So the benefit of doing that in a team, it also builds that vulnerability and trust, of course, if you set it up in the right way. So for building confidence, it's all about practice and getting feedback, practice and feedback, and practice and feedback. If, however, your communication need is more to do with clarity, I've got a bit of an example that we'll share on the screen again. This is an exercise that we did a couple of years ago in some training when we were looking at the meaning of communication and that messages that can get lost in translation. So if you were to read out this statement, and you might want to do it, which will entertain the people in your home or office that you're with today. Emphasizing different words, see how the meaning shifts with a different emphasis. So for example, I never said he kissed my wife has a different meaning to I never said he kissed my wife. I never said he kissed my wife. 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 So that we used as an illustration in training, and you might want to do something like that or similar, and you can find loads of examples online just to get a conversation started around the meaning of communication and how use of tone and emphasis can change that. There's lots of examples you'll find online around that. So a final thought on communication, because we're moving at pace through this. A lot of conversations that I have with people about a desire to improve communication is from the position of how can I communicate more effectively to my audience? Of course, a lot of communication is actually in the listening. So a question to put to you, what performance improvements might you see across your organisation if more emphasis was put on listening? And I'll leave that one with you. We're going to move on to item number 4 on our list. So item number 4 was about the ability to work alone. Another one that we need to get under the skin of. So if we're looking to develop this skill, we're assuming, therefore, that currently there is an inability to work alone. And why is that? Is that because there's an inability to work, full stop, or inability to work alone, and being alone is the issue? And let's assume that being alone is the issue. And that's to do, therefore, with the environment that someone's in, that someone has the ability to do the job if they're in the office like we used to, but where we've all had to move and work from home and work remotely, people have lost that ability. So we need to be careful how we approach this, because is it a training need, or is it actually how that person responds to different environments? Is it actually an issue with the environment itself? So thinking about a few examples here then, if it is to do with the environment, a couple of questions to be asking yourself. Do people have the tools? So have they gone from an office with all of the kit to working on a laptop on the corner of their bed with their housemates in the room next door? Have people got the tools? Have people got a clear expectation of what they need to deliver? Are they clear of what's expected of them? Have they got a structure to their day? structure is a large part of our work and our effectiveness and our productivity. And of course, when we're in an office, there's a natural rhythm to the day, isn't there? When people go for lunch or even for cigarette breaks or the time that different things happen. I know from experience sat here in my loft that where I don't have team members around me, I'm having to be much more conscious of how my day sits together. The biggest area, I suspect, though, to do with the ability to work alone will be to do with someone's motivation. And that can be a terrifying thing as a manager, that we can't see our people, or we're worried about the amount of output that they're creating. So 3 ways that you can think about someone's motivation and their own self-motivation to do the work. And for this, we're drawing from someone called Daniel Pink. So the first is about understanding the purpose of their work. So how does the work that they're doing, even if that's popping numbers into a spreadsheet over and over again, do they understand the bigger picture and the purpose and the value that is created from that work? And it doesn't even have to be the most noble, world-changing purpose. It's just having an understanding of the bit that I'm doing has a contribution to make to something greater than just myself. The second thing is about autonomy. So to what extent do people have a permission to experiment and to create and make decisions about how and when tasks are done? Because if we feel really shackled and restricted in what we do, that can be demotivating. But having creative freedom over our work to a degree, which is permissible at least, is very motivational. So having purpose, having autonomy, and having the chance to master the work is another. So are there ways in which someone can get better at what they're doing? And is there a mechanism for feedback that tells them that? So if it was a computer game, are they going from level 1 to 2 to 3 and beyond? How does someone's work follow that same pattern? How can someone get better at what they're doing and have a sense of achievement and growth and learning? So there's 3 ideas that you might want to consider if you're thinking about a disparate workforce in particular and the ability to work, thinking about their environment and thinking about their motivation. I just need to touch on as well well-being, and this has been rightly well documented and spoken on a lot this year. It came up as the #1 concern for organisations, the mental well-being of their staff in our survey. But loneliness, anxiety, depression, stress, they're enemies. A lot of your people will be battling these things in secret, and we have a duty of care to our team members, to our employees, to our colleagues, to look out for them, to look out for each other. And of course, that is going to have an impact on their ability to do their work. So bear that in mind as well. There's lots of resources that you'll find, but if you're struggling to get your hand on anything helpful, then let me know and I can point you towards some resources. So we've covered 4 and time rolls on. We're going to move on to number 5, which is about the grasp of technology. Now, before the pandemic, technical skills have been spoken about a lot, and that's continued, particularly where we're working remotely. So the UK government are putting lots of money into the development of technical skills, reskilling, upskilling. We know it has a direct correlation with our productivity as the UK and so on. So one thing to mention before we look at some of the tactics is apprenticeships. And if you have written off apprenticeships, let me emphasise the need to reconsider them. So we've had a lot of success with apprenticeships, and they can be a really great way of developing technical skills in your organisation. On a more day-to-day level, though, if you want to train teams on the systems at their fingertips, a couple of things to share on this. So if you've bought a system, Salesforce or some other CRM system, or you've got Microsoft, ask your provider for training support. Often part of their sales package will be training, provision of training, and it might be that you've got this and paid for it and not taken advantage of it yet. So ask your provider. That might be a trainer, it might be training videos that you can upload to a system. If you can't get your hands on that, there'll be various free resources online, and again a quick nod to read.co.uk, where there's lots of courses for things like Excel and other systems. If your system is in-house though, and bespoke, so you've built it yourselves, you can't buy anything for it. If you need to build your own, my suggestion would be to get a screen recording piece of software, and there's lots of options available. Do some voiceover over the top, put your subtitles in and share those. They do not need to be snazzy. Don't spend time on making them look all nice and jazzy. All you need is just lots of short videos on how to complete different tasks that people can watch and then go and do it. If you're going through more of a change program, and anytime you introduce a new piece of software and retire an old piece of software, let's be aware that that is an emotional process for the users of that system, even if it's a rubbish system that you're replacing. What can you do? The final 5 tips relate to that. Expose people early, so get people familiar with the tool before they have to use it in anger, and it may well be in anger. So companies will often have access to a practice system or demo, so get that if you can. Many of you will be familiar with the change curve, so that plays out when you take people through the rollout of technology. So help people navigate that journey. It's an emotional journey. It's not just about teaching them how to do it. It's about the why, and why are we changing, and what does this mean. Think about the logical order in which the steps go. So is there a kind of ABC to the way that you introduce different parts of the training? Remove the old system. So for all of the investment in a new system and training, even if it's infinitely better than the old system, our habits as humans will lead us back to doing things the way we've done them before. So sensitively and at the right time, but as quickly as possible, take the old system away so people don't have the option of going back to it. And finally, another one on mentoring, I mentioned it earlier, reverse mentoring. So if you haven't come across reverse mentoring, it's typically where a more junior person will mentor a more senior person, and use of technology, grasp of technology is a great example of this. So, for example, the things that are intuitive to a 20-year-old may not be intuitive to a 50-year-old, and therefore use that. You've got that knowledge internally. So companies might use this for social media or web design, but technology is a great example of using reverse mentoring. Now, if you're like, Roger, this is not scratching the itch. When I'm talking about grasp of technology, I'm talking about coding, I'm talking about database, I'm talking about data science, and things that are I'm being asked of by our IT department I just don't understand. Read.co.uk courses, it's for you. It's for you. So I did a check last week, 41,717 courses under the category of IT, like right across the IT piece. So use that discount code and check that out if that's for you. The final one, and we want to move through this quickly so we can get on to some Q&A. The 6th most in-demand skill, as responded to by our survey, is financial skills. And we can look at this in 2 parts. So financial skills might relate to those of you that need to train accountants. And I suspect that will be a minority. So what we're going to do is concentrate our attention instead on actually the financial skills that we all need within an organisation. And that is having a commercial mindset, thinking commercially. What do we mean by that? That's having a closer eye on costs, thinking about how we can be diligent in expenditure, thinking about better ideas around generating income for the organisation. Tips on how to do that, tips on how to develop a commercial mindset within your organisation. Number 1, expose your staff to the data. So it's not uncommon for managers to hold back that information, that data, that information around performance and finances. And I understand the hesitation for sharing things with people, but I see often managers are overcautious. And actually, if you've got all of this context that your team don't have, that can be really hard for them to understand why you're asking them to do things or the implications of decisions. So sharing information within reason is something that I'd encourage you to do. Secondly, help people understand the bigger picture. So again, this is similar to sharing information, but if someone is putting through an expense request for a £20 bottle of wine for a customer, and they think that's perfectly valid, perfectly reasonable, especially given the amount that this customer has spent with us this year, that might seem fine. But if you've got 5,000 people submitting a £20 bottle of wine expense saying, oh, it's fine, there's an impact financially on that. So helping people see the bigger picture is important. And the third and final point on this is just making sure you're clear on your expectations. So be mindful about moving the goalposts, be clear and transparent. If you've got policies around expenses or spend or income, money is a sensitive topic, isn't it? Make sure you're clear and providing that information. So I hope that helps as a bit of a recap and point you towards where you can find more help. We invite you to use the Q&A box, and in a moment I'll hand back to Amy to navigate us through that. We've mentioned there's a manager guide that we've created for you. So I would particularly recommend that if you're here today and you're like, I've been asked to deliver training, I just don't know what I'm doing, that guide is my Christmas gift to you. It contains some ideas. I've mentioned the discount that's available, so 10% discount for you lot. Today the code is Read Skills, and that's available on any course on read.co.uk throughout the month of December, so fill your boots. Finally, my colleague Matt is on the call as well today. We offer a learning and development consultancy service, so if actually beyond this, beyond the courses on read.co.uk, beyond the manager guide, you still need a bit more help, do get in touch with us. We'd love to have a conversation with you. But Amy, at this point I'll hand back to you, and perhaps we can take a look in the Q&A box to see if anything's come through on there.
Certainly, thanks for that, Roger. Brilliant. So we've got a few minutes to take a few if anyone's got one. We've got one come through from Dave. He's said, given the restrictions on traditional training, how would you recommend catering to the different learning styles in the team, especially thinking about cultural or general expectations while we're still all remote working?
Yeah, welcome Dave. Dave's calling in from Singapore. Good to see you on the call, Dave. Thanks for a nice tricky question to start us off with. So the restrictions on traditional training, and by that I assume you mean the ability to gather people and having to do things disparately and remotely. How would you recommend catering to the different learning styles in the team? I think it's about giving people options, giving people choices. So what would that look like on a really practical level? If you need your entire workforce to understand a new piece of legislation, I would say it's not enough just to create that as a document and send it out to them. What you want to do is you want to host calls like this. You might want to have focus groups. You might want to have a piece of e-learning that you can put together quite simply to support that. And regardless of whether it's a cultural thing or a generational thing or just a personal preference thing or a learning style thing, you know, some people prefer to read, some people prefer to watch, some people prefer to listen, some people prefer to talk it through. So giving people options rather than just having a kind of mono delivery of all training has to come through this particular channel would probably be my starting point on that one. But thanks for the question, Dave. See, there's another one here about posting the free mentoring schemes. So what I mean by that is for you to set one up internally. It's free. So what I can probably help with there is just a bit of the mechanics, the infrastructure, because you'll need someone in your organization to manage it. But just kind of off the top of my head, coming up with a mentoring agreement that mentors and mentees can both read and kind of contract together is important. Having a fixed length of time is important, and having some way of administering and knowing who your partnerships are, because often mentoring partnerships will emerge, and that's great. But you need some, you know, a spreadsheet will do the trick of these are all our mentors and these are who they're paired with and these are the dates that it will run to. And yes, we've got a copy of their mentoring contract, which sets out how often they'll meet and the role of the manager and so on. So I hope that helps, but if not, my email address I've shared, so feel free to reach out for a bit more help on that.
Got another one here, Rog. If a member of staff comes to you and asks for like X training, do you just go with it if you've got the funds to be able to do so, or how would you approach that? Would you have to assess their need for that training? How would you do it?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a balance. I don't think the answer is just to go and buy some training from somewhere on that small amount of information. It depends on your role. So if you're in a learning and development role, then no, do not do that. As an L&D function in your organisation, you need to steward resources better than that. If actually a line manager has autonomy to make decisions and you're just administering a process, then yeah, maybe you do just fulfill that request. But if you have any sort of HR or L&D responsibility, then you need to diagnose a bit better than that, because it might be that I guess the illustration that I'd use is me going to my doctor saying I need this particular type of medicine. I'd expect the doctor to say, whoa, hang on, You can't just self-diagnose. There might be a more appropriate way to help you get better. So hopefully that illustration answers it a little bit.
Yeah, brilliant, cool. I don't think there's any more that's come in. Let's have a look. No, I think we're all good. On that note, thank you very much, Roger. Very informative. I hope everybody that's on the call agrees. The webinar for all of you that are listening has been recorded, and we'll share that with you as a bit of a follow-up to this event, along with the ebook that both Roger and I were talking about. Please feel free to share the content with other people if you feel it would help and be relevant to them. And look out for details of our up-and-coming events on the Reed LinkedIn social profiles, or ask your Reed consultant. And I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and thank you very much, Roger.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Enjoy your
Thank
lunches.
you.